Good morning, friends. Welcome to the week 23 of our Samachar Manthan program. So this week we will, along with the news articles, we will cover the Yojana for the October. Next week we will be covering the Kurukshetra. So let's start with the topics. The Yojana will complete it at the end of the lecture. So first important issue is, which was in news, there was an article in Livement, and there have been systematic articles over this topic in last 1 or 2 years. Even in the Sri Lankan case, the Sri Lankan crisis issue, this issue was in news. So this issue is debt trap diplomacy. So this is used, or this word is given by experts like Brahma Pichilani for Chinese foreign policy in last few years. So what do we mean by this debt trap diplomacy? So debt trap diplomacy means when a country gives a loan to another country, and the motive of the loan is not to welfare, or the motive of the loan is not to bring welfare in that country, but to ensure that the country is in debt trap, which means that the country does not have enough money to repay, and therefore extract political or economic favorable deals from that country. So which means, suppose there is a country X, which is a powerful country, which deals with the country Y, which is a small, poorer country, and the GDP of the country is suppose $100 billion. Now X gives Y $150 billion as loan, and the intention of X is not to bring welfare in Y, but to ensure that it is not able to repay that 150 billion, because it's a huge number, and the capacity of that country is not that big that it can repay the loan. Therefore, what Y will do is, Y will either, if suppose this loan is given to build port, so Y will give X the port on lease for 100 years, for 150 years, or Y can allow X to, or Y will give military base to X, or Y will, sell something of the stake in the PSU to the X. So all these extraction or all these deals will be given to X by the Y in age of, because it cannot repay the loan. So since it cannot repay the loan, it will have to repay X on kind, and that kind could be either giving access to port, giving access to military base, or giving share in the PSU of that country. So China in last 10-15 years have been giving lot of loans around Asia and Africa. So in Asia, we are seeing Gwadar port, we have seen Myanmar, we have seen Sri Lanka, Hambantota port, where a huge amount of loan are given to these countries. Then we see the example of Africa, Zambia, South Africa, Kenya, Malaysia, Congo, Djibouti. So in a lot of countries, China have been giving loan for infrastructure development, and there is nothing wrong in that, because these countries require loan. The problem lies in the fact that in the ages of the loan, what China extracts is very, very favorable deal. So what China does is, the China says, okay, so first of all, the conditions of the deal or the loan deal is kept hidden from the media, the public, etc. Secondly, China ensures that suppose China gives loan to Zambia for building probably a dam. Now China usually ensures that all the construction workers, all the managers, at least all the managerial staff which will build the dam will be from the China. So ultimately, the ultimate beneficiary of this deal is China, because China is given contract to build the dam, right? So the Chinese private companies benefit from that. Also, since Chinese are employed in that project, so the employment is created in China and not in Zambia. So when the deal is of this kind of deal can be called as debt trap, or it can be called as an example of debt trap diplomacy. The Chinese completely reject this notion. They say that this is a Western and Indian propaganda to ensure that these countries, continue to remain under the control of these countries. Therefore, there is nothing called debt trap diplomacy, and we give loan to these countries because of, or we give these loans to these countries in order to bring development in these countries. So let's take some of the real life examples where China has used, debt trap diplomacy. So in Sri Lanka, China give loans to Mahinda Rajapaksa government in order to build the airport in the Matala Rajapaksa airport, also to build Hambantota port, and the loan given for this project was $361 million. And 85 and the interest rate was 6.3%. Last year, Sri Lankan government told the Chinese that we don't have money to pay you back the loan amount. Therefore, what Sri Lanka did was to give lease it gave lease of Hambantota port to China for 99 years. So for 99 years, next 99 years, China will manage the Hambantota port. Now, India is concerned because China can use that Hambantota port for building a naval base just very close to India. So India and US are naturally concerned because of that. Next is the example of Djibouti. So it's a country at a very strategic location in Africa. So China actually financed a number of public works project in Djibouti, including a stadium, the office of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the palace of the president, and other infrastructure projects. And finally, because of the loan given to Djibouti, the Djiboutian government fell into debt trap, and ultimately Djibouti had to give China the access to its port to build military base. So China now has a military base in Djibouti. Next is Zambia. In Zambia also, China gave a lot of loan to, in Zambia, China gave a lot of loan, and when the government in Zambia told the Chinese that we don't have enough money, and then Zambia had to give stakes to Chinese government in the biggest PSU in Zambia, which is ZESCO. ZESCO is a coal PSU, sorry, not the coal, the copper PSU. Next is the example of South Africa. There also China has given a lot of loan. Then we have example of Malaysia. Some people say the example of Pakistan in the case of Gwadar, because people in Gwadar area are also protesting because everything from raw materials to men to labor to manager, everything is being done by Chinese, which means there is no local employment which is being created. Experts say that one belt one road is also somehow example of debt trap diplomacy, where China will give excessive loans to the Central Asian countries, and then China will extract some very good political and economic deals from these countries. So why do African countries take loan? Why do some Asian countries take loan from China and not from the West? I mean, if there is so much problem the Chinese loans are creating, then why do are these countries fool? So let us now understand why China or why these countries take loan from China. Well, the first reason is the infrastructural needs. So as you know that Africa is no more a dark continent. Africa is going really well. Out of top 10 growing countries, GDP growth countries, 8 are from Africa, and it needs the World Bank says investment of some $150 billion in next 1 decade, and it does not have enough capacity and resource to make this deal or to do this deal on its own. Therefore, Africa has to rely on the outside support. Now, when you talk of outside support, there are it has two options. One option is to go to the West, Britain, US and Canada and IMF and World Bank. Second is to go to China. But it chooses China because of two reasons. First reason is that these World Bank and these IMFs, they don't give loan to middle income countries. So according to the growth, the Nigeria, the Kenya, the Ivory Coast, the Zambias, the Botswanas, they are considered as middle income countries. So the World Bank and IMF usually give these loans to LDCs, or what you call as low income countries. And since these countries, Kenya and Nigeria, would take maximum loan from China, they are part of middle income countries, therefore they don't get loan from World Bank and IMF. Therefore they have no option but to go to China. Next is that the loans given by IMF and World Bank comes with a lot of strings attached, which means you have to, it has to be transparent, you have to take care of your environment, your growth should be sustainable, there should be no corruption, you should follow proper labor laws. A lot of strings are, you have to change your system according to their needs. China says we don't care. You do anything. You are dictator, you are democrat, your growth is sustainable, it's done because you are burning rainforest. We don't care. We give you loan because we believe that project is viable. So China only sees viability, and whether that project is economic viable or not. If it's economic viable, we don't care. So that is why these countries take loan from China rather than taking from these countries, because they get Chinese loan very easily, and you require the loan for the growth. So this ends the first issue of the week, which is debt trap diplomacy. Let's move to the next issue, which is the need for strong contract enforcement in India. So this contract enforcement was in news because of the recently released ease of doing business rankings, where India performed, though India's ranking improved overall, but in the contract enforcement criteria, we were ranked 162 out of 190 countries, which is a very dismal ranking. So, what is exactly a contract enforcement? Contract enforcement means when the ability to enforce contracts and resolve disputes. That is what you call as contract enforcement. And why is contract enforcement important? Well, you need to have a solid contract enforcement regime in order to create what you call as market confidence or business confidence. A strong contract enforcement regime also reduces uncertainty and it promotes fair play in the economy. So take an example. If in a country somebody cheats you, I mean you are suppose you are from US and you invest in an African country of Congo, and you get an alliance with a domestic manufacturer in Congo. Now suppose you both sign contract or you sign a deal before you start your joint enterprise. You are producing something, for example copper. Now suppose the domestic manufacturer cheats you. Now what option do you have? You have option to go to court and sue him. That see, there was this contract which was signed, and according to the contract this was the clause, and now the other partner is cheating me. Now suppose it takes 10 years. It takes 10 years in court for the final judgment to come. For 10 years, the project will be stalled. And for 10 years, the US company will have to pay the legal fees. So, it will cost the US company a lot. And this example of US company will disincentivize the other US companies or the other Western companies to invest in Congo, because they will know that if the local partner cheats with me, I have no resolve. I have to go to court, which takes 10 years, and it will cost me a lot of legal costs, plus my project will be stalled. So let's not invest in that country. Let's invest in probably Ivory Coast, which has a better contract enforcement regime. So for market sentiments, for business confidence, for fair play in the market, we need, or for ease of doing business, we need a strong contract enforcement regime, and that is why it is also included in the ease of doing business index. Now let's talk of situation of contract enforcement regime in India. So India, it takes around 4 years for a contract case or a contract enforcement case to be, or it takes 4 years for a case to end, and which involves 31% of the claim value. So it takes 4 years for a commercial dispute to be, it takes 4 years for the commercial dispute to be solved in courts, and it finally takes 31% of the total claim value. So for example, if X party sues the Y party that it has lost 1000 crores because of Y. But over 4 years, 5 years, when the case is being run, the project is stalled, and you have to pay the legal fees. It usually, even if you won the case, you ultimately, the loss you bear is 310 crores. This is all hypothetical example. So it shows how inefficient our contract enforcement regime is. When we talk of China, in China it takes 1 year and 4 months for a commercial dispute or for a commercial dispute case to be given or to be solved or for the judiciary to give the verdict. And that is why India is ranked 162 out of 190 in the ease of doing business index in the criteria of contract enforcement. The reason why we have such a dismal state of affairs with respect to contract enforcement, the real reason is judiciary, our overburdened judiciary. Because our judiciary is overburdened with so many other cases that it's impossible for judiciary to hear the case on fast track basis with respect to commercial disputes. So, what are the costs of a poor contract enforcement regime? Let us understand. This is very important, and please listen carefully. First cost is a direct cost, which we have already discussed. The project is stalled. The legal cost you have to bear for all these years when the case is being heard in the court. Second is it discourages innovation. This is very important point. You should closely listen. Now, for a country to grow, we need what? We need innovation. No country can grow without innovation. The economic growth models clearly says that innovation is responsible for long-term economic growth in any country. And how does innovation comes? Innovation comes through risk-taking ability. You have to take risk if innovation has to come. Without risk, if you don't, if you are very risk averse, you will go by the wind and you will not think out of the box. Now, this innovation is brought by these new companies which talk of certain new ideas. Now, because of poor contract enforcement regime, the companies deal with only those companies with which it has familiar relations. For example, there is a company Tata and there is a company Birla, and Birla supplies goods to Tata or raw materials to Tata, and Tata produces. In some goods, Tata supplies inputs to Birla and Birla produces. They are companies for 150 years, very, very reputed, and it has got a very credible track record, and both these companies have a family kind of relation. Now, Tata will not go for, suppose, Civils Delhi, which is a new company, because it knows that tomorrow it can cheat me, and if it cheats me, I will have to go to court, and it will waste my 4-5 years, and I will bear a lot of cost, legal cost, plus the other kind of time cost that I have to bear. So rather than investing in a innovative company like Civils Delhi, which is trying to create some new product, innovative product, I will deal with Birla. So ultimately, poor contract enforcement regime discourages or it disincentivizes innovative companies to come to the market. So you will have only those players who traditionally work, who have a traditional mindset, and who work in a risk-averse way. Because these companies know that if we deal with these new innovative companies and if they cheat, it will cost our time and money. So therefore, let's stuck to those companies which we or whom we know from last many decades and who have a solid track record. Next is it leads to higher interest rate. So the banks would, if there is a very high probability that the lenders or the borrowers will default on loan, and then it will go to court, and the process will be slow, the banks would charge a higher interest rate from the borrowers because it knows it has to put some risk premium because of uncertain contract enforcement regime. So uncertain or inefficient contract enforcement regime leads to higher interest in the economy because banks have to be sure that or banks are not sure whether their money would be returned or not. Next, it promotes vertical integration of companies. Now, there can be two types of integration: horizontal integration and vertical integration. So horizontal integration is when a country or when a kind of company produces similar kinds of product. For example, there is company, suppose Tata Tea. It also produces coffee. It also produces green tea. It also produces black tea, etc. So all of them are related kind of products. This is called as, or this can be the example of horizontal integration. Vertical integration means when there is a company, suppose Hyundai. Now Hyundai also produces the steel. It also produces the seats. It also produces everything. I mean, when one company is in the chain, it does not deal with any other company. Everything is produced by the intermediary. So and all the raw materials are produced by the subsidiary company of that parent company. Then the market is also part of the same company. So when there is poor contract enforcement regime, then the companies start distrusting with the other companies. So therefore, what it leads to is that the same company would promote all, or it will produce all the raw materials and the final product. So ultimately, there could be no scope left for cheating. Right, but it is inefficient because usually one company does not have expertise in producing all the raw materials in the chain. Probably, there could be a company Y which produces better steel or at a lower cost than Hyundai, but Hyundai will not deal with him because Hyundai is not sure, or Hyundai believes that there is a scope of cheating, and because of weak contract enforcement regime, it will waste my time and money. So let's not deal with them. Let's produce the same good myself. So ultimately, it creates inefficiency in the economy, and this leads to what we call as uncompetitive environment. Because in India it will be like that. In US it will not be like that. In US there would be Hyundai would produce only the car. The raw materials would be produced by different firms, which would be more efficient than the Hyundai in production of those raw materials. So if we talk of India, we have an example of this. If you talk of India's e-commerce sector, so in e-commerce sector, we have successful examples like Flipkart and Amazon, And we have not so successful example of Snapdeal, of eBay. The reason being that these Flipkart and Amazon, they have a hybrid model, while Snapdeal and eBay have a marketplace model, which means you can sell anything on our platform. We will not produce anything. It is you who have to sell everything on our platform. When we talk of Flipkart and Amazon, it's the story is different. They allow other producers to sell their goods in their platform, but Flipkart and Amazon also produces their own good, right? So there is competition. There is competition because the other producers know that Flipkart and Amazon produces really high quality goods, and we have to compete with them. We also have to produce very high quality goods. Same is not the case with Snapdeal and eBay, because it's a marketplace model, so it does not produce anything on its own. It just relies on outsourcing. And because of this, they have failed to grow, because in Snapdeal and eBay there are a lot of quality issues. The products not being of good quality, the products of who stop working in few days. So therefore it has lost the customer trust. When we talk of Flipkart and Amazon, because of what we call as vertical integration, they are successful, because rather than relying on suppliers, they have started producing their own goods. Next is it centralizes industries. So when there will be vertical integration of a company, the company will grow very big. It will grow very big, right? And this means that in a country there would be 10 or 15 or 20 big what you call conglomerates. And this leads to what? First of all, it kills competition. Because when one company will be producing something at a very high scale, there will be economies of scale, right? Which would mean that small players cannot compete with these big companies. So it will kill competition, and secondly, it will lead to inequality. So few people like Ambanis and Adanis would have share over 70 to 80% of the wealth, and rest of them would be poor. So inequality and anti-competition is not good for a democracy or for a market economy. And lastly, it promotes illegal channel of dispute resolution. So when the courts or when the formal channels do not work, usually a strong middleman, a local politician is involved to mediate or to end the dispute between two parties. Now it has two concerns. First of all, this middleman does not have the expertise, and therefore it will give optimum decisions. And secondly, it leads to what you call as under the table deals. It leads to corruption, because one party will give the middleman that you take this money and give verdict in our favor. So it leads to all kinds of corruption, all kinds of under the table deals, and plus suboptimal decision making. So all these are the cost of a poor contract enforcement regime in a country. When we talk of India, India has taken some steps in last few years. So India has passed, or the government in India has passed commercial courts, commercial divisions, and commercial appellate division of High Courts Act 2016. So this act provided for establishing a dedicated commercial bench in the district court and in the high courts, and the state government has been given responsibility for the infrastructure development, for training of judges, and for creation of a separate commercial bench in district and high court. And these high court and district court commercial benches will only hear cases of high values, not of 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 5 lakh, of high values, in order to ensure that they are not clogged with small cases. But even though we have established this institution, but it's not working on the ground level, because the states, first of all, the states have told the district judge itself that in some hour of the week you hear the commercial cases. The state government has not created a dedicated new kind of judges for that. It has just assigned the job to the normal district judge. First of all, normal district judge does not have the time. He has to hear so many cases of crime and other things. And secondly, he does not have the expertise in the commercial matters. So ultimately, on the ground level, this act has not been working. So this ends the second issue of the week, which is this thing. Now let's move to the next issue, which is a very small issue that will take 2 minutes. So ASEAN member countries of RCEP offers India concession. So the RCEP countries of ASEAN, they have said that India can open 83% of its market, and because earlier it was proposed that India should open 92% of its market. Also, RCEP has given freedom to India that if it wants, it can have a separate deal with the bilateral country. So, for example, India is concerned that after signing RCEP, already our market is filled with Chinese goods. After signing RCEP, the situation would go worse, and Indian markets would be flooded with the Chinese good, which will make our MSME uncompetitive. But RCEP has said that India can do bilateral deal, which means India can say that for next 5-10 years we are signing RCEP, but with China we will not exactly open our market. So 2 exemptions have been given to India. First is that it can only open 83% of its market, and 17% of the market it can still protect, which means it can impose tariffs on those sectors in which India feels that if it will open, it will destroy the local industries. So RCEP is growing. The idea of RCEP was to end the negotiation by December 2018, but it is not likely to take place. I mean, the end of negotiation, because there are elections in India, there are elections in Indonesia, there are elections in Australia, and any concrete decision on RCEP would be taken after the elections. Let's move to the next issue. Which is PCR, Public Credit Registry. So we have missed two issues of elections in Maldives and elections in Bhutan, and we will be covering that in the next week. So don't worry that we will not cover. We know this, and because we thought of ending everything and getting good articles, and then we will discuss that. So we will discuss Maldives and Bhutan in the next lecture. So this was in news because recently the RBI has initiated steps to set up a wide-based digital public credit registry in India. So what is PCR and what is the current regime? What is PCR and how it will help? So currently we don't have one centralized registry which gives us information about the credit value, about the credit history of a borrower when he goes to the loan or when he goes to the bank to get a loan. So we have what you call as CRILC. CRILC is there, which was established in 2014, but CRILC does not give you the overall big picture, or it does not include information from all the sources like ECB, other sources like SEBI, like GST, and etc. So and secondly, it only gives information if somebody has taken loan of more than 5 crores, only then it gives information. So we have what you call as fragmented registries in India. One registry deals with something, one deals with one sector. We don't have an overall centralized registry in India which takes information, which generates information, or which stores information from all the sources where the borrower has taken loan or from where the information is available, either in India or in abroad. And why we need the PCR? We need the PCR because of following reasons. We have an NPA problem. An NPA problem, one important reason why we have the NPA problem is because the banks did not have information about the credit history of the borrower, and therefore it gave loan to those people who did not have the capacity and who had a past record of not paying loan, and that is why some part of NPA problem was created. So this PCR, first of all, it will ensure that the banks will know that okay, this person has a very good track record, he has never defaulted on his loan, give him the loan. This person has defaulted on a loan 6 years back, not a very trustworthy person, so we will not give him the loan, or we will give him small loan, not big loan. So this is it. First of all, it will solve the NPA problem. Secondly, it would lead to inflow or it would decrease the interest rate, which will bring in more investment. Why it will decrease the interest rate? Because interest rates are higher because the banks are they they feel that the loan is risky because many borrowers are not paying it back. So in order to keep risk premium, we will have to charge higher interest rate because it's a risk we are taking. But when they will be PCA, the bank would be sure that we are giving loan to a very, very credible borrower. Therefore, we know that he will repay the loan. Therefore, the interest rate we will charge also it will be low. So interest rate is dependent on risk premium also. That is why you see the interest rate given by the treasury bond is very low, because treasury bond is very safe asset, while the interest rate of a C rank company or a B rank bond is very high because there is risk quotient involved in that. And thirdly, it will improve the ease of doing business. So one kind of component of ease of doing business is how easily you get the credit, and this will the improvement on this front would improve the ease of doing business ranking in India. So how will this PCR work? So PCR will include data from entities like market regulator like SEBI, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the GSTN, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India. It will also kind of capture information from NBFCs, from corporate bonds, from ECB, external commercial borrowing, from foreign currency convertible bonds, from masala bond, and from intercorporate borrowing. So therefore, once the bank will have information from all these areas, it will take a 360-degree of profile check for existing and prospective borrowers. So this ends the fourth issue, which is the public credit registry. So the fifth issue is Section 66A of the IT Act, and this was in news because there have been lot of incidents of it being used, even though this act this section was scrapped by the Supreme Court 3 years ago in the Shreya Singhal case. So what do we mean by Section 66A? So 66A means that any person who sends by a means of computer resources or a communication device any information that is grossly offensive or has a menacing character. Secondly, any information which he knows to be false, but for the purpose of causing annoyance, inconvenience, danger, obstruction, insult, injury, criminal intimidation, enmity, hatred or ill will, personally by making use of such computer resources or a communication device. And thirdly, any electronic mail or electronic mail message for a purpose of causing annoyance and inconvenience, or to deceive or to mislead to addressee or recipient shall be punished with an imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years and with fine. So this Section 66A was scrapped by the Supreme Court 3 years back because it has been misused. If you have been reading newspapers before that, it was misused during the death of Bal Thackeray, when there were two girls. There was one girl who shared a post, and the post says that, why are we closing the city? It is causing great harm to the people. And the other kind of person who liked that post, both of them were arrested by the police by invoking Section 66A. It has also been used recently and many times. I mean, somebody who is saying something against a politician, and then this section was invoked and they were arrested. So this Section 66A was violating the Article 19, freedom of speech and expression, and it was giving a chilling effect. So activists and the journalists were getting arrested with the use of this section. Therefore, Supreme Court found that this section violates the Article 19 of the Indian Constitution, and therefore it scrapped the act. But even though this act was scrapped, its uses has not been dormant, because the problem is that in India, if Supreme Court gives any verdict, it does not automatically removes that statue from the act which is there in the police station, which is there in the parliament. For example, the IT Act, which is there among the police station, still contains section 66A. And therefore, lot of ignorant police people who are unaware with this verdict still invoke this provision to arrest people on the grounds of this kind of section. Because in India, the problem lies in the fact that there is no automatic procedure where if a Supreme Court gives a verdict, and automatically that section is taken out from the statute. There is no kind of compulsory, there is no automatic provision in India. So the uses and the disuses of this section depends on whether that police station or whether that state has got information from the top that now you don't have to use section 66A or not. And many police stations in India, they have not got information from the top with respect to non-uses of section 66A. Therefore, they are using it freely even now. Now, it creates two kinds of problem. First kind of problem is that that it meant that people who have not committed any crime, they were arrested. So this violates what? It violates the Article 21, right to life and liberty. I mean, you keep him in jail for 10-15 days for a section which is not exactly a law anymore. So how would you repay him? I mean, 15 days you've kept somebody in jail for a crime which he didn't do, which is actually not a crime itself. Right. Second problem it creates is that it is unequal. Which means mostly the victims of this section are those people who are poor, who are illiterate, or who are poor, who are not very literate, because these people do not hire good quality lawyer. And the lawyer which they hire are themselves unaware of this verdict of the Supreme Court. Therefore, they go to the court and then they say that please don't do it. Our client did not wrote anything. He did not say anything. He did not meant anything. But in actual terms, the lawyer will have to go to the court and say, sir, he has been booked under section 66A, which is no more a crime. So you give him, you kind of, acquit him. So because of this, many of the poor and many of the people who are not very educated, they get arrested. Now that data is very cheap, everybody writes anything on the Facebook. It's not, now Facebook is not used by only the elite people or very educated people. It's used by everyone. So he may not be very aware with this section 66A. And he gets arrested and he goes to court, and even in court the lawyer is not aware of the fact, and then he goes to jail. So that has been happening in last 3 years since this section has been scrapped. Ultimately, if a lawyer is well informed, he will go to court and say, sir, this section is no more in use. So within few minutes the guy will get acquitted. But this is not how it works, given the fact, the condition of lawyers in India. So therefore, this OPIT says that we need to have a system where automatically, when Supreme Court gives the verdict, automatically the Parliament should amend the law. So this, in the IT Act has not been amended by the Parliament. That is why it still remains on the statute. So there should be a process where if Supreme Court passes a verdict where it scraps something, automatically Parliament in the next session should pass an amendment, and through an amendment it deletes that provision from the act. Then there will be no confusion, because when some amendment takes place and this is deleted, automatically the information will be given to the police stations, automatically the information would be given to the states, and the states will then transfer it to the lower level. So this is what is required, because otherwise, not just in section 66A, in many other statutes or many other illegal provisions which have been scrapped by Supreme Court are still being used by the police, by the police people. The biggest example of this could be the sedition law. Even though in the Kedarnath case, the Supreme Court has clearly said that if the speech does not talk of violence, if it does not talk of overthrow of state by the use of violence, then nobody could be booked under sedition. But since Parliament has not amended the law, the police people still have the original, sedition law which was passed during the British era, and therefore they are unaware of this Kedarnath judgment, and therefore they arrest people on sedition charges, even those people who have not used any violence, who have not used any invocation to violence in their speech. Right. Let's move to the next issue. Which is also an op-ed, an important op-ed about Muslims, and because NSSO data shows that Muslims are educationally and they are much behind the other communities. So NSSO, the data shows that in terms of education level, Muslims are far behind the other communities. So let's first understand the stats. So according to the 68 round of NSSO, only 15 out of 1,000 Muslim men or male are postgraduates in urban areas. And this number is 4 times lower than Hindus, Christian and Sikhs. So in Hindu, Christian and Sikhs, 60 out of 1,000 are postgraduate. In Muslims, only 15. When we talk of the male graduates among Muslims, it is 71,000. It is 71 out of 1,000, which is half the number, or less than half the number of other communities. Also, if we talk of higher secondary education, the Muslims are far behind the other communities. The dropout rate is highest among the Muslims. So what are the reasons for the low education rate in India? First reason is poverty. So when we talk of Muslims, the average consumption of Muslims in India is 32 rupees per day. And if we talk of the average fees in technical courses in government and private unaided colleges, it is 25,000 and 64,000 for the private. And the per day average consumption of Muslims is only 32 rupees. So therefore they cannot afford to pay so high salary, and that's why they don't go for the higher education. But why are they poor? Why are they poor? We have to think of that, why they are poor. So in India, even though Islam does not permit caste system, but the Muslims of subcontinent practice a kind of casteism based on their, from which Hindu caste they got converted, whether they are natives or they can, claim of foreign blood. So in India, there are basically three kind of Muslim communities in India. So first is Ashraf. So we can talk of the top. Ashraf. Then you have the Ajlaf. And then you have the third one, which is Arjal. So when we talk of Ashraf, these includes Muslims who can claim that they came from Arab, or they came from Central Asia, or they came from, they're not local converts. Though this could be the Sayyids who claim that they belong to the family of the prophets. Then you have the Pathans, the Sheikhs, and the Muslim Rajputs. So they are considered kind of a Brahmin in the Indian Muslim communities, and therefore they are economically more better. They have more jobs. They have more lands. They are mostly the Jamidari class in India. The next level is Ajlaf, which is technically those people who converted from the local Hindu caste, from the lower caste of Hindu. These includes the Darji, the Julaha or the Potter, the Ansaris. They include the Hajam, the Dhobi, etc. So they are usually part of the OBC community, other backward caste community, and their condition is really bad because they are usually involved in the traditional practices or traditional. So a son of Hajam will become Hajam, a son of Darji will become Darji, a son of Dhobi would. So when you, in North India at least, when you say that most of the carpenters, most of the painters are Muslims, most of the barbers are Muslim, because their ancestors converted from that caste and they are still practicing that occupation. They are still practicing that caste-based occupation in India. So they usually follow the traditional occupation of their family, and therefore they don't go to school. Third is Arjal, which is those who have commuted from the SC community. These include the Bhangis, those Muslims who are converted from Chamars. So they are the lowest of the lowest. Their condition is very poor. Now the problem happened that when the partition of India took place, most of the Ashrafs migrated to Pakistan. And these Ashrafs were people who were the part of the bureaucracy, army, judiciary. They are part of the business enterprises. They were the big landlords. All of them migrated. Most of them migrated to the Pakistan. What remained in India was mostly the Ajlafs and the Arjals. And since they were not educated, they were, even in India, if you talk of the Hindu Dalit communities, the Hindu backward caste communities, their education level and their, economic level is much below the upper caste. So same happened among the Muslims. The Muslims who remained in India were exactly from the lower caste, who had no value for education, who believed that, my son should follow my occupation. And that is the main reason why educational backwardness started in Indian Muslims. So there is a historical background behind it. I mean, people would say that, no, the Muslims don't like to educate, they are very religious, orthodox, that's why they are educationally poor. There is a historical background behind that. And this historical background is partition. Because partition led to the migration of most of the Arabs to Pakistan. And from that to now, the educational condition of Muslims have remained backward. Right. Next reason why they have a low educational standards is indifference of the state. So the state, if you talk of the data, in the Muslim concentrated districts, there are very few schools, there are very few colleges. The government has not launched any specific schemes for those districts, and that is why even those Muslims who want to study, they don't have any school or college near their proximity. They have to go very far, and that is why a lot of them don't go to schools. Next is religious conservatism. And actually, because of religious conservatism, first of all, many Muslim clerics, they look modern education with suspicion, and therefore the parents who are under the influence of these Maulvis, they don't send their kids to modern schools, they send it to madrasas. And most of the madrasas in India, they are very backward, they don't preach modern education. And therefore these people stay in madrasa, they don't go to higher education. Right. One more reason why they go to the madrasa is because it's because of the first factor, which is poverty. Because they are poor, they cannot afford school fees. Therefore, they send and in madrasa is free of cost. Therefore, they send their kids to madrasas. So, what does this low education leads to? So, low education creates what you call as vicious cycle of poverty in India, or it creates a vicious cycle of poverty among the Muslims. So low education leads to less probability of finding good jobs. Which means that they are stuck in their traditional occupation. Which means that they remain poor. So ultimately, it is a vicious cycle. So the data shows that labor force participation rate, which measures how many people are in job and how many are looking for job. This in India among the Muslims is very low. It's 342 in the urban areas and 337 in the rural areas. So only 34.7% Muslims, they are in job or they are looking for job, which is a very, very less number compared to other communities. When we talk of the work population ratio, which is number of people employed, even that is very low among the Muslims. That is somewhere around 260. So what are the steps which needs to be taken by the government to, because see, you have 200 million Muslims in India, which is actually a much higher population than any other country in the world, any other Muslim country in the world except Indonesia and maybe Pakistan. So a country cannot grow till 200 million of its population remain uneducated, remain poor. I mean, how could you grow? How could the concept of inclusive growth will fall? It will fall if a large section of India's population remains uneducated and poor. So there need to be drastic steps which the government needs to take in order to increase the education level among the Muslims. So first is scholarships or subsidies. So usually after class 10th, it's more likely that the Muslim people will drop out because you have to pay more fees. See, till 14-year-old, the education in India is free till 8th. But after 8th, you have to pay the fees. So therefore, what government can do is government can launch a scholarship or a subsidy scheme for the Muslim community where in 9th till the higher education, the government subsidizes the education for the Muslims so that it is cheap for them and more of them can go to school. Next is there should be AMU off centers or off campus centers in Muslim concentrated districts. So like we have IIM and IIT off centers, we can also establish AMU off centers in Muslim concentrated districts, because as we have seen in the concentrated districts, there are hardly any opportunities for good school and good college. Also, we can develop primary and high schools in the minority concentrated districts on the pattern of Kendra Vidyalaya. Also, we need to run awareness campaigns in all the minority concentrated blocks. One more very important thing we need is madrasa modernization. And after the madrasas are modernized, they follow the syllabus of CBSE. The people who pass from madrasas, they should be admitted to the colleges. Because the problem is that these people who get educated in madrasa, after they kind of complete the education, the degrees are not recognized in the college and ultimately they drop out. So the good thing is, so what government should do is government should ensure that all madrasa follows the CBSE pattern, and once they are educated, they should their degree should be accepted in the colleges. Also, there is a scheme running for Muslim students, which is Maulana Azad National Fellowship for Minorities. So there should be more kind of funding which should be given to the scheme. Right now the funding is very less for the scheme. Also, there should be national overseas scholarship for minorities. So we have the scheme for the SC and ST communities. The minority should also be included in that, and they should be given scholarship for those who want to study in technical degrees abroad. Also, the government, for those students of Muslim communities who are weak in academics, government should run a scheme for vocational education. Because as we know that lot of Muslim communities have a very good talent in arts and crafts. Therefore, we should, those people who are not academically sound, the government should train them well in the art of vocational education. So this ends this issue. Now let's move to the next issue, which is the contribution of Indian soldiers in World War One. So World War One has completed 100 years, and therefore it becomes a probable question for the UPSC exam, mains exam. And we all know a lot about World War One. Everybody would have read history books, but there is very less in the history books, probably nothing about the contribution of Indians in the World War One. So this was in news recently because finally, some countries like Britain and France have started recognizing, and they have started, kind of establishing war memorials for the soldiers for the Indian soldiers who died in the World War One. So India was not fighting in the World War One as an independent company. It was a colony of Britain, and therefore it has no option but to support Britain, but to fight on the side of Britain. So around 1.5 million soldiers fought for the Britain in the World War One, and many of the generals say that without the contribution of India, it would have been difficult for the Britain to win the World War One, to defeat the Germany, and even the France kind of recognizes that. So 1.5, and we fought the war in Western Front. We actually fought the war. The soldiers fought against the German armies in East Africa. We fought in Mesopotamia, which is modern day Iraq. We fought in the Gallipoli. We fight in Egypt. We fight in other places like Belgium. India played a very important role in the defeat of German forces in Belgium, in Ypres. So we contributed a lot in men terms. Not just in men terms, we around 50,000 Indian soldiers died. Also, India supplied 170,000 horses and other animals. We also supplied 3.7 million tons of supplies, which include jute for sandbags, and around 2 billion pounds in today's times of loan was given by India to Britain to fight the war. So this is the kind of military contribution and the other kind of contribution India did in the World War One. And recently the France has said that it will establish a second memorial for India on November 11, and this will commemorate the Indian soldiers which died in the World War One. In 2002 also, France established a memorial at Ypres where 130 Indian soldiers fought and 10,000 of them died in the battle at Ypres. The Prime Minister of Britain has also pledged to wear a khadi poppy in the honor of more than 74,000 soldiers who died. So First of all, why did India did not recognize the contribution of them? Because for Indians, these soldiers were not patriots because they were fighting for the Britain. They were not fighting for the liberation of India. Therefore, after independence, these soldiers were the martyrhood of these soldiers were forgotten by India. And when the 50 years of World War I completed, we did not have any kind of celebration in India. The Britain, however, recognized the contribution of Indian soldiers, and therefore it established India Gate in Delhi. And in India Gate, the names of those soldiers who were died were written on that. Now, why did so during the World War I, the Indian nationalists, they also supported the war. So anyone, including Gandhi, including Nehru, including Tilak, including Gokhale, all of them supported the Britain because they believe that if we will show our loyalty to Britain, then after the end of the war, Britain will give us dominion status. So in the hope of that, the Indian nationalists, the Indian congressmen, they even raised fund. They even raised fund for the army. They did not launch any mass movement in that period. They also kind of, asked the people to enlist an army to support the Britain more in their difficult times. But after the war, we expected dominion status, but what we got was Rowlatt Act, what we got was Jallianwala Bagh, what we got of others what we got was unemployment, what we got was inflation, what we got was wartime shortages and restrictions. So therefore, when India did not got the dominion status which it wanted, the Indian nationalists under the leadership of Gandhi, they launched the non-cooperation movement. So when we talk of World War I, ultimately, even the non-cooperation movement, even the what we call as, the Indian nationalist movement got a boost because of World War I. So a question could be asked in UPSC, not in a direct way that discuss the contribution of Indians. It could be asked on a way that how did World War I influence the Indian national movement? So in that case, you will have to write these points that, we hope, the World War I ended the little bit of trust that was there between the Indian nationalists and the Britain, because Indian nationalists, they understood the true nature of the British rule. They understood that these people they have no intention to leave India, and we will have to do something very, very significant in order to give boost to them. It also had impact on World War II. So when World War II happened, the Indian nationalists learned from the mistakes of the World War I, because they knew that even if we support Britain after the end of the war, if it wants the war, it will again show us a empty thumb after the war. Therefore, in the Second World War, the Congress ministry resigned and we protested against the war. Indian nationalists did not support or did not give the holistic kind of support which it gave in the World War I. So, and actually we used that moment to launch the Quit India movement, and Quit India movement played a very important role in the independence of India. So ultimately you have to link all these if a question is asked in the exam. Let's move to the next issue, which is the need of custom duty rationalization. It is also an open. So there has been a rise in custom duty recently, and the government has been hiking custom duties in different areas. So recently it has been hiked for the telecom equipment. So all these measures are being taken because Indian government has said that we want to reduce inessential imports from abroad, because the rupee has been falling, the current account deficit has been increasing. So in order to counter that, the government has came out with a plan that we will ensure that the inessential imports, the things which we can produce in India, we will not import from the outside. And therefore the OPED says that we need to have a custom duty rationalization, and it gives 2-3 reasons why we need the custom duty rationalization in India. So the import theory says that you should only import or imports are only a necessity when you don't produce it in your country, then you have to import. But if you have a good base in India, if your local domestic industry is competitive, then it is better if you produce that good in your own country, because when you import you have to pay for that, you have to pay higher for that, plus you have to you have to pay in the dollars. So why do we need custom duty rationalization? So we need to do that because of 2 main reasons. First is there is lopsided duty structure, which means that in India, when we talk of raw materials, in the raw materials, the custom duty is very high. And in finished goods, it is very low. Now what it leads to is that because of very high custom duty on raw materials, the Indian manufacturers cannot import those raw materials from abroad. So there are many areas where you need to import raw materials from abroad in order to produce the good. Because the custom duty is very high, you don't import that. But the finished good, the custom duty is very low, which means you have dumping of goods from foreign countries, especially China, to India. And that affects our domestic manufacturing capability. So what we need is the opposite: high or very low custom duty on raw material and high custom duty on finished good. That is how we will be able to produce for our own market, and we will not be dependent on imports. That is how we will be able to reduce the inessential imports from abroad. Second thing is that there is underutilization of resources. So in many areas, even when we have the raw materials, we have the manufacturing capability, and we even produce, even after that, we import those goods. For example, we take the example of iron ore. So India produces 210 million tons of iron ore every year, which is far more than what it consumes. But still, 30 to 40, and the iron ore it produces is also cheap. But still we import from abroad because, first of all, the custom duty is very, very low, and secondly, the transportation in India is not developed. So therefore, we kind of the steel industries, rather than taking these, or rather than buying these raw materials from India, what they do is that they import it from abroad, right? One more example is aluminium. So in India, we produce around about 4.1 million tons, which is 1.25 times its consumption. Still 60% of it is imported from abroad. Next is the case of zinc. So in zinc also we kind of, our industry, our domestic reserves can meet the need of zinc, but still we import 185,000 tons of zinc from abroad, and around 70% of them come from South Korea. So first of all, in those areas where we have the manufacturing capability but we don't have the raw material, thanks to inverted duty structure, we have to import from abroad. Secondly, in those areas where we have the resources, where we have the production, everything, even after that we import from abroad because of low custom duty. Therefore, and thirdly, the FTAs, the free trade agreement that we have signed with different countries, they are mostly signed for geopolitical reasons, first of all. Secondly, it's very shallow. So we have opened our market in those areas in which that country is more competitive, but they have not opened the market in those areas where we are more kind of competitive, and that has led to destruction of our local industries, and we have not benefited from South Korean or from Indonesian market because they have protected their market in those goods. So these ill-conceived FTAs are also responsible for inflow of inessential imports to India. So therefore, this op-ed says that we need to rationalize our custom duties, we need to increase the custom duties in order to increase the manufacturing base in India, in order to only import those things in which we do not have manufacturing base in India or we do not have the resources in India. That will bring macroeconomic stability, and that will also reduce the current account deficit in the long run. So this ends this topic. Let's move to the next issue, which is the issue of vaccine-derived polio. So, vaccine-derived polio. So, as you know that in India, we have won against the wild polio virus. Now it is, the WHO has declared India to be free from the wild polio virus, but that is not the case with vaccine-derived polio. So, before we understand, let us first understand the basic principles of vaccination. So, when you are filled with drop of vaccine, the vaccine enters your body, and the vaccine contains either a weakened form of the polio virus, or it contains a dead polio virus. And the idea behind this is that when this drop will be inside that, your immunity system will fight against them. He will recognize the antigen of that virus, so that in future, if this wild polio virus will enter your body's immunity system will release a strong antibodies against that virus, and it will kill that virus. So the idea behind the vaccination program is to make your immunity system familiar with that kind of virus, so that in future, if the virus enters your body, it would be killed by your immunity system. So in India, we have two kind of, or in word, there are two kinds of vaccines we give for polio. One is the OPV, or the oral polio vaccine, and second is the IPV, which is injectable polio vaccine. So in the case of OPV, which is very much prevalent in India, oral polio vaccine, the vaccine which enters your body, that contains a weakened form of virus. It is not killed virus, it is a weakened form of virus. So what you do is, a child excretes that virus, right? After excretion, that virus goes to the environment, and many times these viruses, what they do is that they genetically modify themselves into a different kind of virus, and then they affect those children who have a weak immunity system, or who don't have a proper sanitation facilities, who go out for defecation, etc. So they affect these people. So in India, even though we are free from the wild polio virus, we have seen incidences of vaccine derived polio virus. And this vaccine derived polio virus is because of the OPV. Because OPV contains the weak form of virus. It does not contain the killed virus. Now therefore what we need is the IPV, or the injectable polio virus, because injectable polio virus, in this case, the vaccine which enters your body contains killed virus or dead polio virus. And therefore there is no chance of vaccine derived polio virus. But why does India do not go for OPV, or why does India do not go for IPV? The reason are there are 3-4 reasons behind that. First reason is that it is expensive, and the number of children who have to be given this vaccine is very high. Second is the production is low, and it cannot meet the demand of the need in India. And thirdly, you need a trained community worker for this. And there is a shortage of trained community worker in India. When we talk of the OPV is easier to administer. I mean, a person with basic health care knowledge can deliver this. Secondly, it is cheap. Thirdly, there is mass production of this. And fourthly, it eradicates the wild polio virus completely. So when India launched the polio program, we wanted to completely eradicate the wild polio virus from the environment. In the case of IPV, it does not completely eradicate the wild polio virus. It only ensures that the child will not get affected from that wild polio virus, but that wild polio virus will be there in the environment. So in the case of Israel have a wild polio virus in the environment, but none of its children get affected because the children all of them have been given the IPV. So India wanted to completely eradicate the wild polio virus. That is why we went for the OPV. But now the experts are saying that with time the Indian government need to invest on the IPV in order to ensure that we don't in order to ensure that we completely eradicate the vaccine derived polio virus. So this ends this issue. Let's move to the next issue, which is the Supreme Court has recently said that there will be no double jeopardy bar if there was no trial. So let us understand first of all what is the concept of double jeopardy. It is mentioned in the article 22. It's mentioned in the article 22. So it's a part of Constitution. So it says that no person can be tried twice for a single offense after the trial is completed. So let us understand this concept with an example. Suppose I am X and I got arrested by the police for the crime of, the police suspects that I have probably stolen a diamond from a merchant's house. So I was taken to court. The court and the police could not give any conclusive evidence against me, and therefore after 1 or 2 or 3 years of trial, the court declares me not guilty. Now after 2 years, the police kind of finds those diamonds in my house, and then police again arrests me and takes me to the court, and again the trial is being run, or again we have a trial for next 2-3 years. So when the second time it happens, that is called as the concept of double jeopardy. And in US, even in India, constitutionally, this is not allowed, which means if the court has found me non-guilty for an offense, then I cannot be tried again for the same offense in the same court. The idea behind the concept is that a trial is a very, very tedious task. It takes a lot of psychological, economic, and social toll on the victim, on a person who is kind of guilty. Who is under trial. And therefore, once he is either convicted or once he is acquitted, he should not face the same burden again. So once he is convicted or once he is acquitted, that's the end. You cannot try him again in the same court, even if you find some very conclusive proof after 2 or 3 years. This is the concept of double jeopardy. Now it runs differently in US and it runs differently in India. In the case of US, once a jury decides that you are guilty or you are not guilty, fine, the case ends there. You cannot again be tried for the same offense in the court, any court of US. It's done now, right? In the case of India, it is little modified. In the case of India, you cannot try the same. So suppose district court acquits me on the crime of on the crime of thievery, so I was acquitted by the district court. Now in India's case, again a case cannot be filed in district court. You cannot again file the case against the same judges that we have now found a conclusive proof, so please again start the trial and acquit him and make him guilty. We cannot do that. You have to go to higher court. So a PIL can be filed in high court against my acquittal, and high court can reverse my acquittal. So India has what you call as a modified kind of double jeopardy concept. In US it's very clear. If any court says you are not guilty, you are done now. You cannot be tried on a same offense again in the court. India's case, you cannot be tried in the same court, but you can be tried in the higher court. So recently, In High Court, in Supreme Court, a case was there where a public servant was arrested on the case of bribery. I mean, the police thought that he is having a assets which is disappropriate to his income, and the police took the sanction of the commissioner, but the rank of that official was of that rank that it required the permission of the governor of the state. But the police did not take the permission of the governor of the state. It only took the sanction of the commissioner of that zone. And therefore, when it went to the court said that you have taken an invalid sanction, and therefore we are discharging the person, or you kind of you allow the person to set free. Now, after few years, the case was filed in the same court, because after some months the governor had finally given sanction for prosecuted that public servant. Then police went to the court and said, now we have the appropriate sanction, now please again start the trial. So the other party said that this is a case of double jeopardy, because that public servant has already been acquitted a few months back. Therefore, you cannot again, you cannot again try the public servant. So in that context, Supreme Court has said that in the preliminary trial, so in the first case there was no trial, because he was acquitted not because of lack of evidence, but because of invalid sanction, because the sanction was not there from the governor. So that could not be considered as a trial. So the Supreme Court said that a trial has to be done before the concept of double jeopardy could be invoked. If a trial has not started, if a person has been acquitted because of invalid sanction, then this concept of double jeopardy will not be valid, and that person could be tried in the same court from which he is acquitted because of lack of sanction. So if you don't understand this, there are a lot of technical words used. If you don't understand, please ping me up on Telegram. I can again explain it in a more simpler language. So now let's come to the Yojana of this month. So the Yojana of this month deals with gender equality. And I will be covering some articles. I have missed out some articles because I have already covered those articles in my earlier lecture. So there was this article on agriculture and women. I have already kind of completely covered feminization of agriculture. Bits and bits, I have most of the things which are covered in this year's Yojana, I have already covered in my previous lectures. But I will still cover some areas which I have not covered in deep. So the theme of this week's Yojana was gender equality, and I have divided it into 6 areas, because the article was different, but I have the main crux of that Yojana was it dealt with 6 and 7 areas, which is reproductive health, education empowerment of women, economic empowerment, all these things. So I have divided it into theme, and I will cover the matter inside those themes. So the key issues which the women in India face are, firstly, reproductive health, so why is reproductive health important? See, if a woman does not have control over her reproductive health, then it is very likely that she will not achieve her potential. Because a woman should have freedom to decide when she should have a baby. She should decide the spacing among the children. She should decide when not to have a baby. Because ultimately, what happened in the earlier times, we all see our grandmothers and the great grandmothers. I mean, my grandmother was, she had like 14 kids. Out of them, only 4 survived. But 14 kids, which means all her life was wasted in raising the kids, in delivering the babies. I mean, what other life? When I talk with my parents and my siblings, I always say what life the woman used to have at that time. Their only job was to have babies and to raise them. They could not participate in other economic activities. They could not participate in other things. So if a woman has to realize its potential, she should have control over her reproductive health. She should have control over her fertility. So what are the problems the women face in this regard? Firstly, the issue of maternal deaths. So even though the number has been reducing significantly during last 10-15 years, but still the maternal death is the second most important cause of death for a woman in the fertility age. So between the age of 15 to 45, maternal death is the second most important reason for the death of the woman. Next is undernutrition. So every third Indian woman is undernourished, which is a big number, which is a very, very big number, and it has an impact on child also, because a undernutrition woman will not feed her baby properly, and there are more likely chance that the baby which will be born will also be malnourished. There is a big chance that a woman could not. There is a big chance that she could die out of childbearing because her body is weak. There's a chance that a child would die. So undernutrition leads to a lot of consequences, indirect consequences. Third is poverty. So because of poverty, the women mostly in rural areas, in urban areas, have to work till very close of their child delivery, because they cannot afford to lose their salary, and they rejoin the workforce just few weeks or few months after they have baby. This again means that the child is not given breastfeed. It also leads to their body is not ready for work, but they have to work, which again have a negative consequences on her health. Next is anemia. So around every second woman in India suffers from anemia, which is a big number. And the reason why the women in India have anemia is because of low overall dietary intake, because of poor iron and folic acid intake, because of fiber-rich Indian diet, etc. So what are the steps taken by government in the field of reproductive health? So first is Maternity Benefit Amendment Act. So this act was passed a few 2 years back, I guess, and it amended the Maternity Benefit Act 1961. It increased the number of paid leaves for the pregnant woman from 12 weeks to 26 weeks, and even after 26 weeks the woman could be given work from home facility. Next is the 3 A's. What are the 3 A's? It is the ASHA worker, the auxiliary midwife nurse, and the Anganwadi center. See, a lot of people get confused between the difference between ASHA and auxiliary nurse midwife, ANM. So every ANM, below every ANM, there are 3-4 ASHA workers. So ASHA worker is the first contact. So the job of ASHA worker is to motivate the woman for institutional delivery. The job of ASHA worker is to motivate them for vaccination. The job of ASHA worker is to bring the woman to hospital for any kind of problem she is facing. So for small things like vaccination, small kind of thing, the ASHA worker takes the woman to the auxiliary nurse midwife, ANM. So she is the auxiliary nurse is the first healthcare treatment which a woman gets for a minor things like vaccination, etc. And every ANM have 3 or 4 ASHA working under her. She takes care, she sees that whether they are working or not. So there is a difference of degree also between them. So a ASHA worker should be 10th pass, and a AMN should have completed the 12th, and after the 12th she should have a diploma in nursing. And that is why the compensation AMN get is higher than what the ASHA get. Anganwadi centers are created during the ICDS scheme, and it's a place where you can, it does multiple jobs. It takes care of vaccination, it gives you counseling on nutrition, it gives you counseling on on vaccination, it gives you counseling on child care, to both to mother, how can they raise the child, etc. It also gives pre-education schooling to the children. Next is Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. So this scheme has been launched in order to compensate the woman for the wage loss she will face if she will not work during the last months of pregnancy and after few months after the pregnancy. So idea behind the scheme is to allow the woman to rest. So a woman is given 5,000 rupees as cash payment in the ages if she has an institutional delivery, and also if she completes the cycles of vaccination. So it's a conditional based cash program. Next is Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan. This is actually launched So this provides care which is antenatal, which means before a child is born. So 9th of every month there will be free checkup for women with the pregnant woman with respect to what is the condition of the woman, and then they are given cards, red card and all. The red card means there's some dangerous things, and green card is that everything is fine, etc. Then there is Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostics Techniques Prevention Act. You all know it's a anti-abortion act. Then you have is Janani Suraksha Yojana. So this is actually this JSY. It motivates the woman for institutional delivery. So for a woman who goes for institutional delivery, she gets money from the government. She gets compensation from the government. The ASHA worker who brings the woman to hospital, she also gets the kind of compensation. Next is Janani Shishu Suraksha Karyakram. So JSSK it takes care of all the medicines. If there is a cesarean operation, so it is also given free. Then all kinds of food, meals in hospital, fruits, vaccination, medicines, everything is given free in the hospitals for those women who goes for institutional delivery. So this is done under the JSSK. Then you have Lakshya program. So Lakshya program is launched for labor room quality. As you know, the labor room quality in government hospital is really bad. So Lakshya program is an initiative which is focused and which is kind of which improves the infrastructure in the labor rooms, which also has a provision for training, for skill development of the personals who are inside the labor room. It also talks of improving the machines in the labor room, and it is a program which gives ranking to the hospital. So those who are in gold standard, they are given extra money by the government. Then you have Mission Indradhanush. Which takes care of vaccination needs of both mother and the child. Then you have a weekly iron and folic acid supplementation. So all these things are there for the reproductive health. Lot of schemes. Then next is economic empowerment. Next theme is next issue which the women in India face is economic empowerment. So in India, the condition of the woman in terms of economic matters is really dismal, as we have discussed also, I think, in one of our lectures, that only 27% of women are in the labor force, which means they are only 27% who are working or who are seeking work, which is one of the lowest in the world. Also, we rank 120 out of 131 countries in female labor force participation rates. The women in India are more likely to be unemployed, the women in India are more likely to be working in the unprotected informal sector. The women in India are more likely to spend their time in the unpaid care, which means raising the kids. The women in India are more likely to be working in part-time formal employment. So these things reflect the condition of a woman in India. So what are the benefits of greater participation of women in the economy? Firstly, it improves the national economy. So according to the IMF estimates, according to the other estimates, India's GDP could grow by 1.5% if all the women in India starts working, or if around 50% of women join the labor force. Secondly, it increases the household productivity and the living standards. So in those households where both men and women earn, there is more chances that the family will break the shackles of poverty and the standard of living of the family would improve. Thirdly, it increases the say of the woman. So you must have witnessed in your households those people whose mother are working, they have a greater say in house in all the matters, because the husband and everyone knows that she is economically independent, so she can, we have to listen to her, otherwise she can also leave us. But in the families where the wife is housewife, everybody knows that she cannot go anywhere else because she is dependent on us economically. Therefore, in those families, the women usually have lesser say than in those families in which the woman works. Next is it enhances the well-being of children. So usually the data shows that in those households where the women work, there is more chance that the child will be educated, there is more chance that they will be immunized, and there is more chance that they will be well raised. So now let us see what are the steps needed to ensure the economic empowerment of a woman. So firstly, the unpaid work needs to be made gender responsive. So as you know that in India, the unpaid work is usually done by the woman. So raising the kids, doing the household work, cleaning, cooking, in most of the household it is done by the woman. And that means that the woman do not have enough time to do economic activity. Economic activity is the activity where you get paid for doing work. And because it has the woman has less time for doing economic activity, that is why you see why they earn less, why they are not the part of labor force. So therefore, what we need is, we need three things, 3 R's. The Yojana says that we need 3 R's to solve this problem. First R is to recognize it, which means we should have a data. We should have a proper data which kind of recognize it, that yes, these are the total hours which a woman devote, and these are the percentage of women who work in this unpaid work, etc. And then you have to reduce it. How will you reduce it? You can reduce it by, through the use of machine. For example, a woman wastes a lot of her time in going to fetch water from the tanks or from the taps. The woman wastes a lot of time in going to forest to fetch the wood for the cooking. This time can be reduced if the government supplies water supply to every household. This time can be reduced if we have LPG connections in every household. So this will reduce the time of women in doing these unpaid work, and she would have more time to do the paid or the economic activity. Third is redistribute it, which means that government should ensure that the unpaid work is done both by the men and the women. It should not be the duty of the woman only to do all kinds of household work. The men should also support her, so that the woman could have more time for economic activity. Next thing which the government should look into is financial inclusion for women. So definitely, if a woman gets a loan, if it gets credit to establish her micro enterprise, then definitely the economic condition of women would improve. If a woman is insured, definitely she could plan the things better. She could, have a better say in the house. So the Yojana gives few innovative ways through which more and more women could be brought under the ambit of formal financial inclusion. First is, we can reform Anganwadi centers. So in Anganwadi centers, India has 1.05 million Anganwadi centers, and Anganwadi workers can be given basic training, and through the use of basic training they could be trained into a bank correspondent, BC, the BC model which we used, and then they can go and they can help the women to open the bank accounts, to give them small loans, to insure them, etc. So this could overcome the problem of banks or the physical banks in the houses, in the villages. Next is innovation in credit scoring models. So, problem with women is that they don't have collateral to get loan. They don't have assets. They don't have resources. That is why it's very difficult for them to get formal loans. So they have started in Africa what you call a psychometric test. So psychometric test is a psychological test through which it can be known, the intention of you can be known, that yes, you are very serious about repaying the loan. Your cognitive abilities are such that your micro enterprise will be successful. Based on that, a loan is issued to you. So that could also be used in India, where a psychometric test could be done of the woman, and based on that it can be judged whether they are capable of getting the loan or not. Next is role of priority sector advances. So, we have loan for priority sector loan should also include women. It has so many other things. It should also include the woman. Next is we should have a tailored products which are suited for women. This I have already explained once in my lecture, so I will not explain it again. So what are the steps which government are taking for ensuring economic empowerment of women? So first is Jan Dhan Yojana, don't need to explain. Second is SSG ecosystem. Again, I don't need to explain because I have explained this in one of my lecture. I will try to reduce the repetitiveness in different lectures. Next is SIDBI. So SIDBI has specific products for women, and these includes Mahila Udyam Nidhi, which is an exclusive scheme for providing equity to women entrepreneurs, and we have Mahila Vikas Nidhi, which offers developmental assistance for the pursuit of income generating activities to women. Next is STEP. So STEP is launched by the Ministry of Child and Women to train the women with no access to formal skill training. So it's basically a skill training program in rural India. Then you have Stand Up India, which again gives loan to SC, STs and women. Then you have TREAD. So in this TREAD, the government gives loan to NGOs working for women, and then these NGOs train the women in basically mostly in rural areas, or the NGO gives loan. They give small loans to the women to make them micro entrepreneur. Then you have Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. You have SEED. SEED is Science for Equity, Empowerment and Development. So it aims to provide opportunities to motivated scientists and field level workers which have focus on women to undertake action-oriented location-specific projects for socio-economic gains. So it exactly funds the projects of those scientists which are working in those areas which is close to the cause of women. Then you have Rashtra Mahila Kosh, which gives loan to women. And lastly, you have the Mudra scheme. Now let's move to a third key kind of area, which is educational empowerment. So, why does India first of all lag behind in education, in women education? The only reason which we say is patriarchy. Thanks to patriarchy, it is considered in many households that the duty of the boy is to get a job and take care of us in the old age, and the duty of a girl child is to get married, because the girl are considered as burden, and it is considered that their actual home is their husband's home. Therefore they should get married, and because they have to get married, therefore there is no need to spend on education. That's why they are not educated. Second thing is that it is considered that the job of a woman is to take care of the household, and therefore in household there's no way you should educate it. Third is that it is considered in these families that if a girl gets educated, she will become too independent, and if she will earn more than the men, that will hurt the male ego, and therefore in order to ensure that the girl remains within the confines or remains subservient to the male members of the family, they are not educated. Fourthly, there is also the problem that they have younger siblings and they have to take care of the siblings. So if they will go to school, who will take care of the siblings? So that is why also they are not educated. And lastly, it is considered if they go to school, probably they will fall in love and everything, and that will bring a bad name to the family. So that is why it's better to keep them at home. So what are the advantages of women education? So there is a saying, I'm not remembering the exact name, but it says that if you educate a guy, you educate one person, but if you educate a woman, you educate the whole family. Because if a woman would be educated, she will ensure that the child will be educated. She will ensure that the other people in the family get educated. So therefore, this is the importance of women education. So first is, it leads to gender equality. I mean, in a democracy, education is the only way through the gender gap between men and women could be reduced, especially for countries like India, where it's so high. Secondly, you need education for economic productivity. So economic productivity would mean that if a woman will work, she will earn more income and the GDP of the country would grow. Thirdly, it will reduce the infant mortality. Because the data shows if a woman is educated, she takes care of the child, she takes adequate nutrition, she goes for the regular checkup, and that reduces the infant mortality rate. Fourthly, it improves the standard of living. Fifthly, it leads to inclusive growth of society. So a growth which is participatory, it can only be done if 50% of the population is well educated, so that they will have good jobs, because education and jobs have a proper correlation. Then you have, it leads to women empowerment. And lastly, it strengthens the democracy. Well, because an educated woman would mean an educated electorate. In India, in most of the household, it is seen that the women don't have their own political preferences. Usually, they are forced to vote to those people who their husband votes for or their father votes for. They don't have the independent mind. But if they will be educated, they will use their mind, they will use the informed decision to choose those people who they believe are educated, who they believe will do well. And that will mature the democratic process, that will mature the electorate in India, and ultimately it will strengthen the democracy. So what are the government schemes with respect to education of women? First is Samachar Bharat, and this scheme has been launched for the adult literacy, and with the focus on adult women's. Next is Right to Education, which again includes free education for women. Thirdly, Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya. So these are residential schools which are built for upper primary girls. Then there is National Program for Education of Girls at Elementary Level. So this scheme is launched for those women who are weak in studies. So there will be a women group which will be formed in every village, and these groups would take care that whether the girl is going to school regularly, whether how is his educational outcome, whether she is not dropping out or not, etc. Next is Mahila Sangh. So this is a forum of women, and they are created. These women talk on a certain day on issues related to them. So related to safety of women, related to lack of assets with women. Every week these women will collect at a place, and they will discuss the issues which concern them. Next is Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, which deals with both men and women. Then there is Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, which focuses on those areas, those districts which have a very bad indicator with respect to sex ratio and the women education. Then we have is National Scheme of Incentive to Girls for Secondary Education. So in this, 3,000 rupees is deposited in the name of unmarried girls when she was below 16 years old, and it's a fixed deposit, and that can be taken once she completes the high school, and or she could be 18-year-old. Next is Uran scheme, which actually provides those girl students who want to join prestigious engineering college free offline and online resources, free offline and online coaching, and free offline and online study material. And then last is Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, which is also a kind of conditional cash transfer scheme for those, and it is for those girls who have completed class 12th. Next is political empowerment. This I will not discuss, because ultimately I have in one of my lectures I have discussed this topic separately, individually, how political representation of women benefits the democracy, and what steps the government should take. This I have already discussed, so I will not waste my time in discussing it again, because there is nothing new in the Yojana. Next is empowering the tribal women. So, tribal women, if you talk of condition of tribal women, it could be mixed. In some areas, they perform better than the non-tribal women. For example, sex ratio. So, sex ratio in tribal, among the tribal women is 990, which is close to 1, because in tribal cultures, the social status of women is high, and there are very few incidences of them getting killed, or there is very less incidence of abortions. But on the other hand, when you talk of literacy, only 49% of tribal women are educated, in comparison to 69% of the male tribals. So what are the schemes and the policies launched by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs in this regard? So let's look at the schemes for the tribal women. First is Eklavya Model Residential Schools. This tries to, these are residential schools built in tribal areas, and 50% of the students in these schools they have to be the girls. Next is National Scheduled Tribe Finance and Development Corporation. This is for the for giving loans to the tribals for starting their own units. Then you have TriFed, which gives assistance to the tribal people and which helps in the marketing of goods or produced by the tribals. Then there is Right to Forest Product, and there is SC or there is Scheduled Tribe Act 2006, which allows the men and the women tribals to make use of the minor forest produces. Now let's move to the last dimension in this year's Yojana, which was women and climatic change. So why, as we are seeing, we are moving towards an era where climate change has become a reality. We have seen more frequent droughts, floods, more frequent cyclones, etc. So why is climate change more harmful for women? So, firstly, more women die than men during the natural disasters. So, the stats clearly shows, the UN Population Fund shows that in natural disasters like in tsunami 2004, 70% of those who were dead were female, and only 30% men died. Why does that happen? Because usually the men are trained in more life-saving skills like swimming, like climbing the trees, while women are considered that they should only stay at home. So therefore they are not trained in those life-saving skills. So that is why they are more prone to death when there are disasters like tsunami, etc. Secondly, the water stress impacts women more severely. And this is because most of the women, they go to the forest for collecting the firewoods. They go to the well. Therefore if there is drought, it is their time which increases, because they have to go to faraway places to fetch water. If a nearby pond it becomes empty, then she will have to go to faraway place to get water, which means she will waste more of her time. Then that will have a psychological and health impact on her. Next is the climate changes increases the health risk for women. So the data from 2000 and 2012 Southeast Asia shows that the diarrheal disease, which is common during the floods, they kill women more than the men. So there are a number of reasons why they are more severely affected. Because firstly, there is unequal access to health services. First priority is usually given to men and then to female. Secondly, the female have more caring kind of ability. So they will go to hospital after everybody in their household, their husband, their children. First, she will ensure that they go to hospital, they get treated. After that, she goes to the hospital. So that also somehow adversely affects her health. And fourthly, the women farmers, they face greater hurdles in adapting to climate change. And this is because the women they possess smaller landholding, they face greater hurdle in getting credit, they are less technologically advanced, therefore they are less aware of methods through which we can counter climate change. They use less fertilizer, and they use lower quality of fertilizer, etc. So what is the way forward? So the way forward according to Yojana is that there need to be a gender analysis which needs to be done at all levels. When we are making any climate change deals at a global level, there should be a gender expert who should be part of the decision making process, so that the deal contains aspects or deal contains provisions or deal contains separate provisions for the women. Also, the women need to be given more control over the resources, because if there will be more control over resources, then it is more likely that they will use the money, or they will use that resources for the family income and for economic stability. Also, it is more likely that they will change strategies in response to new information. And thirdly, they will take decisions that will minimize the risk. So this ends the Yojana initiative. Now we will go to the prelims part. Not many topics this time. For me, most of them are being taken care by Rakesh. Okay, so let's go to the prelims topics. So, Indian Railway has said that it will eliminate all the unmanned level crossing in next 6 months. So, what is unmanned level crossing? In which there is no one who opens and shuts a door. It's open. So anyone, so the cars can go, trains can come, and it leads to maximum railway accident deaths in India. And the government has made a good progress. So in April 2018, there were 3,479 unmanned level crossing, and the recent stat shows that 3,402 unmanned level crossing have been eliminated, and now 77 unmanned level crossings are there, and they would be also be eliminated in next 1-2 months. Next is India and Nepal passenger train will make its run in December. So it will be a first train which will go from India to Nepal, and that will connect the Jayanagar in Bihar to Dhansua district in Janakpur zone of southeast Nepal. And it's a 34-kilometer stretch. So India has been focusing on railway links because China has said that we will also connect Tibet from Kathmandu. So before China does that, India wants to have a railway links with Nepal. That is why it is augmented the process. Next is the center eyes on seaplanes in Uran Part 3. So Uran scheme, as you know, is a regional air connectivity scheme, and the government is saying that in the phase 3 of the Uran scheme, we will connect lot of areas with seaplanes. So the statue of Sardar Patel, the Ahmedabad Sabarmati riverfront, all these things will be connected by the seaplanes. Also, government is thinking of connecting tourist areas like Bodh Gaya, Agra, Kana, Hampi, Mysore and Kullu with under the scheme. Next is BBC has launched the fake news fight back with a global campaign, and recently the Minister of Communication was supposed to deliver a lecture in the seminar organized, but he dropped out when it was found that majority of fake news in India is dealt with either Modi or the BJP or the nationalist kind of propaganda. That is why, in order to not face uncomfortable questions, he backed out of the summit. So the idea of this BBC fake news project is to organize hackathons where tech solutions could be identified to counter the fake news. There will be workshops for the media literacy. Then there would also be training in the schools. There would be more seminars which will be organized. There will be more panel discussions. Also, BBC will come out with reality checks in these elections that will take place in India. So last news of the day is that Cabinet approves laying down procedure and mechanism for the sale of enemy shares. So, what do we mean by enemy property? So after 1965 war, what the government did was that government acquired or government appointed a custodian to those properties whose owners migrated to Pakistan. So those owners who migrated to Pakistan and who became the citizens, they were considered as part of enemy, and therefore their properties in India were not acquired, but they were actually, the control was taken over by the government, and the government passed the enemy act, the Enemy Properties Act 1968, and the act said that there will be custodian who would manage those properties, and the owner of those properties will not have any share for those, or they will not have any control over the properties. So the biggest case and the most high profile case in this regard was the case of Raja of Mahmudabad, which is a place in UP. It's a small jamidari, and Raja's father migrated to Pakistan in 1950s, but the Raja's son and his wife remained in India. So Raja's son went to the court and said that how could I be an enemy? I have always been an Indian. So how could I be blamed for my father's decision? So every way the Supreme Court, in High Court and Supreme Court, he won the case. Later on, government brought in the ordinance, and now the government is saying that because in last 40-50 years, government was just the custodian of that property, but that property was not being sold. So ultimately, the government was not benefiting from it. So now the cabinet has approved a mechanism and procedure for the sale of enemy shares. So all the enemy property will be sold, and government believes that it will bring him approximately 3,000 crore rupees, and those 3,000 crore rupees would be used for health and education. So this ends the issues of the week. We will be meeting next week. Thank you.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civil State.